Welcome back to my second video of logic building involving patterns. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to generate triangular patterns. I'm going to elaborate the basic logic behind it and also tell you that how to write the pattern code using one loop. Let's go. So let's begin our first program by generating this pattern of hashes. What is the most important part of this pattern? Hash itself. So let's print hash first. Now, what do we see next? As we move in every line of the pattern, the number of hashes increases by 1. Therefore, for now, I want everyone to focus in the first line. Now, if we want to print hash only one time inside a loop structure, how can we print it? For I equals 0, I less than 1, I plus plus. Now, let's move on to the next line where we want to print hash 2 times. So we have to execute this print function 2 times. How can we do that? Moving into line 3, we have to print hash 3 times. So how would the loop structure look like? For I equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus, and print hash inside it. Next line, I equal to 0, I less than 4, I plus plus, print hash inside it. So what can we notice here? This variable keeps on increasing as the number of lines are increasing in the pattern. So what if we put this entire structure inside a loop? Let's see how that happens. At first, we print hash. After that, we put this in an iteration such that for every line, the number of hash keeps increasing. Let's consider the counter variable as k. Until here, if I set k is equal to 1, the loop will execute only one time and only one hash will be printed. After printing the first hash, we need to move to the next line. So let's print an escape sequence for next line. Now if I set the value of k is equal to 2, then the loop will execute 2 times and 2 hashes will be printed. After that, if k is equal to 3, 3 hashes will be printed and so on. So what do we need to do is we need to increase the value of k after every iteration. Let's consider k equal to 1 first because we are putting 1 here. K should be less than equal to 5 because there are 5 rows in this pattern, and ultimately increment k by 1 every time. Last but not the least, as we have introduced two new variables I and k inside our program, I need to declare the two variables. Finally, our program for this pattern is complete. In our next step, we want to print this same pattern using only one loop structure. We will need two variables here, same as before, int I and k. But here we are going to use k as a limit to the number of hashes we are going to print in each line. So let's initialize k with 1 as the first line contains only one hash. What should we do next? As we need to print 5 lines of hashes, let's start a loop for I equal to 0, I less than 5, I plus plus. And what are we going to do inside this loop? We are going to print hash. Now there arises a condition that the number of hashes would have to be equal to the limit provided. In our first line, the limit is 1. So we print hash only up to while I is lesser than k. We give a condition here. If I is less than equal to k, then only we print hash. Now, as per our condition, what happens when I exceeds the limit? That is, one hash is printed in the first line. I should move in the second line. So else, the first thing we do is move to the second line. As we move to the second line, we see that the number of hashes increases. So the next thing we have to do is we have to increase the limit by 1. Now what happens is, as we move from first line to second line, k increases from 1 to 2, but I still remains the same. Therefore, the variable I will not start from the value 0, but it will start from the value 1, leading us to print only one hash. So what we need to do is, we need to restart the flow control of I from 0. Finally, we need to assign -1 to I. Why -1? Because after the control re-enters the loop, I++ will be executed at first and -1 will be converted to 0. So now the value of k is equal to 2 and the variable I will have the value 0. The first thing our program will do is it will compare 0 to 2. 0 is lesser than 2. One hash is printed. Now as the if part is satisfied, it will not go to the else part. Hence the value of I now increases to 1. 1 is still lesser than 2. Hence another hash is printed. After that, the value of I increases to 2. 2 is not less than 2. Hence, the control will move to the else part. It will shift to the next line. K will increase by 1. Now k turns to 3. And I is again changed to -1. So now, when we re-enter the loop, I again starts from 0. 0 is compared to 3. Hash is printed. 1 is compared to 3. Hash is printed. 2 is compared to 3. Hash is printed. Notice the point. As we move every time into the loop, the value of k increases by 1. Hence, we can end our loop here. Finally, the program for this pattern is completed. As the last problem of this video, we are going to generate this pattern of hashes using two loops step by step. So what's the first step here? Printing of hash. Now what do we notice in this pattern? Unlike the first pattern we did before, this pattern consists of 5 hashes in the first line, 4 hashes in the second line, third hashes in the third line, which means that as the number of lines increases, the number of hashes keeps decreasing. So let's print hash inside a loop where I equals 0, I lesser than k, I plus plus. The next thing we know is, as one line of hashes is printed, we need to move into the next line. So printf escape sequence for next line, that is /n. Now notice very carefully guys, in the first line there are 5 hashes in total, so the limit is 5. In the next line the limit decreases to 4. So what do we have to do is, we have to decrease the limit inside the loop. Initially the limit k is 5. We have to continue until k is equal to 1. So k greater than equals 1 and k minus minus. What happens here is, initially k is equal to 5. I starts with the value 0. Prints hash. One hash is printed. Control moves here. I is equal to 1. I is still lesser than 5. Hash is printed. I is equal to 2, 3, 4. Until I is equal to 4, hash is printed. After that, the cursor moves to the next line. K decreases from 5 to 4. I continues from 0 to 4 and therefore 4 hashes are printed. After that, I should continue from 0 to 3. 3 hashes will be printed. Finally, when the value of k decreases to 1, I will go from 0 to 1 and only one hash will be printed. After that, the cursor will move to the next line and the program will end. Last but not the least, as we have introduced two new variables I and k to our program, we should declare them. And finally, our program is complete. Before ending the video, I have a question for the audience. Can any one of my viewers attempt this problem by using only one loop instead of two? Try it on. So guys, I'm going to end this video here today. Please make sure to comment if you find any mistakes in the video or you have any doubts regarding pattern generation. See you in my next video. Stay tuned.